Hello, West Texas. This is Marfa Public Radio, KRTS. My name is Jason Kolker, sometimes go by the nickname Oslo, and today we're going to be continuing the rich KRTS tradition of exploring the people, the personalities that give our listening area so much depth, so much identity. For about the next 29 minutes, we'll be speaking with local businessmen, author, craftsman, I got a list here, sometimes candidate for office, political philosopher, social gadfly, maybe, and a bunch of other stuff we'll get to in a sec. But that's all wrapped up in one person, Mr. Lineaus Lorette. Lineaus, thank you for coming by.
Certainly.
A handshake.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I want to give you an invitation, Lineaus, and every listener we have right before we start, and that's this. We're a community radio station, proudly, and we got about as expansive a community as you can imagine, in imagination as well as square miles. And if you folks have an idea for a talk at 10, please let us know. We listen. The number is 432-729-4578. The email is info@marfapublicradio.org. Lineaus, I'm glad to have you here. I got so many questions for you. Let's start off with this. I know that you, I see you in Marfa, Texas, quite a bit. That's where the station is. But where do you live? Where are you from?
Well, I was born in South Louisiana. I have no roots in Louisiana, but my father was worked for Shell Oil during the Good War, and that's how I ended up being born in Louisiana. But I grew up in Odessa, Texas. I moved there when I was 5, and that's where the family stayed until they passed away.
Now, I just kind of announced that we have an expansive listening community that it doesn't have, it's got a lot of depth. There's a real... If you want to make a stereotype of West Texas, good luck. I couldn't do it. But I think I could tell you what a stereotype would not be of West Texas, and I think you might fill the bill. So as they say, let me count the ways. I'm just going to give a whole bunch of stuff so the listeners know what we're talking with here, and then we can jump in wherever you want. You are a seller of fine artistic lamps.
Yes, I am.
You are an accountant who sometimes uses imaginative means to help your clients.
Sure.
You are a man who has 20 dogs? How many dogs?
No, I have 11 right now.
11 dogs. And how many of those dogs have 4 legs?
10.
10. You are a craftsman. You make medicine balls that some say are the best in the world.
They are the best in the world. They're recognized all over the world as the best made.
You are an art collector?
Yes, I am. I have a huge art collection.
You have run for Senate or what?
Yes, I ran for U.S. Senate in '82. I've run for county judge here and mayor once and city council once. I don't get elected.
And I promise you we'll get to this later on, but I just want to mention now you are also at times a radio critic.
Yes.
And at times an art critic.
Yes.
Vegetarian.
Yes.
We'll get to all of that. Right now, I see you have this big red star on your shirt. I always see that red star, and I guess that means you are a big fan of the Dallas Cowboys.
No.
What's going on with that?
The red star to me is the collectivist ideal, and I call myself a communist because that's the clearest way to describe my political beliefs. And I'm not a Marxist-Leninist, and I'm not an anarchist. I'm a community communist, and I know I bring a lot of misery to myself for using that term, but I really believe the term has power. And for 20 years, I was a Taoist, and I used to read the Lao Tzu all the time. And one of the things that the Lao Tzu teaches you is to make use of something, make use of nothing, and you have something. And I think if there ever is nothing in this world, it is the word communism, but it still has power, and I will make use of that nothing to make something again.
Well, given that we said you're an accountant, and I happen to know that you have at least at times been an extensive landowner, and that you are an ardent churchgoer, a faithful churchgoer.
Used to be.
Used to be, okay.
Oh, we can talk about that.
We'll get into that right in a sec. People, I'm sure, hearing that you are even a little C communist, not a Marxist, not a Leninist, but a sharer, if you will, they're going to suggest that there's some hypocrisy there.
No, you have to look at the history of communism, and early in the 19th century, communism was the idea formed, and you have to remember that in Europe, at this time, the Jewish population was not allowed to own property. So they could own merchandise, so they could own inventory, but they were not allowed by statute in Europe to own real property. Mm-hmm. And it makes sense that as a consequence of that, people would think of utopian ideals of community organizing where no one owned property. And, the real famous statement is property is theft by Lenin, because all property has its antecedents in the theft of the property from someone. We stole all the property here from the Indians. But we have, property has become a system of exchange and is like inventory. And I think the abolition of property is an idea that hinders communism's growth. I think we have economic rights, and I believe in the right to health care, retirement security, education, free education, the right to live in a habitable house, the obligation to work. Those are that's what communism means to me.
Okay, I wish we had hours and hours so we could have different, we could have the dog talk and the political talk, but we don't have that kind of time. Okay. So real quick, and then we'll move on, what would your style of collectivism mean for West Texas if you had your ideas implemented?
I'm a decentralist. I think the city should have all the power to tax, the power to regulate human behavior, the power to control technologies, and all the power should reside in the community. What it would mean out here is that we would have very rich communities, because I think that unlike, America is the only country in the world in which the surface owner owns the subsurface mineral rights. Well, this is a contradiction and has to change. And I think the community should own the subsurface. And out in West Texas, that means oil and gas would be owned by the communities, and we would have a very prosperous place.
Okay, well, given that, this is now a personality question, but I mentioned you're a vegetarian. You're gay, right?
Yes.
And you're a small C communist, and yet you live in West Texas where there are not a lot of people who fit that bill. Have you ever had trouble or friction with your different attitudes? You've been out here a long, long time.
Oh, there are people, there are people all the time that don't want to have anything to do with me because I'm a communist, and so that's just their problem. But I've run into, in Mexico, communism has a higher standing, and so a lot of I can't tell you all the experiences I've had that reflect the support I get from working class Mexicans and Hispanics in this area for being a communist.
Let's get into this. You're an accountant, and you make unbelievable medicine balls. That's my editorializing, because I've seen them at the pavilion here on Saturday mornings, where you sell them in person. And that uses two sides, at least two sides of your brain. You might have more than the rest of us. But let's get into that. How did you become an accountant, and how did you become a craftsman?
Well, I became an accountant because in my senior year in high school in Odessa, you had to write a paper on what you were going to do with your life. And I wrote this paper on being a physicist because that's what I was going to be. And I found out you had to have a PhD, and I didn't want to go to school for 7 or 8 years. And so I was looking for something to do, and I got out the paper and looked in the want ads, and there were all these jobs for accountants. And so I thought I'd be an accountant. And I did self-parent a lot as a child, and that my choice of a career is an example of self-parenting. I chose an occupation that I could get a job. And once I did that, my parents thought that was great and never would let me change. And I hated being an accountant because I was the only communist. I was a communist in high school, and I was the only communist in the business school in Austin and at the University of Texas. But it's been a good living, and I can't be hoodwinked about the nature of capitalism and the nature of the tax system and the nature of commerce and business and that sort of stuff.
You're saying because you're an accountant, because you have the inside scoop a little bit, you are empowered to actually deal with this stuff that you criticize a lot.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Well,
Thank you for saying it so well.
I'm just speeding it up. But that leaves the medicine balls. And let's...
the medicine balls.
Well, before we get into it, tell us what a medicine ball is, because I think it's still kind of an exotic piece of exercise equipment.
A medicine ball is a large leather ball, a large ball used in exercise. Traditionally, they were leather because all balls are made out of leather. Mm-hmm. The problem became in in the 80s and 90s is that because of the leather, they became expensive, and so now there are a great many rubber, plastic, vinyl, all kind of medicine balls. I'm the only person in the world that makes the very high quality leather medicine ball that's made to last decades.
But how'd you learn how to cut leather? Where does this come from? You've described a guy, basically, at least growing up, kind of a nerdy guy who was academic and cerebral, and now you're telling us that you actually, as a craftsman, are one of the best in the world, at least at what you do.
Well, my mother was an artist, and that has a lot to do with my art. I had an art education, and I was taught as a child that I could master any craft, and leather work is a craft, and I never doubted that I could master it. My father was a two-time All-American wrestler from Oklahoma A&M, Oklahoma State, a gifted athlete, and so I have some sort of athletic abilities from my father. And I taught taught a class at the Austin YMCA using an old medicine ball, and tried to buy more and found out no one made them, and it was a perfect opportunity to develop a craft. And I've always wanted to have a craft. I used to be a printer. And, I heard on the radio the other day about letterpress. I've owned a letterpress. I went to trade school to learn to be a pressman. And so part of me that people don't know is that I have gone to trade school to learn to be a printer. And but I prefer medicine balls as my craft rather than letterpress.
Okay, well, before we leave accounting and medicine balls, I'm going to ask you a quick question, or I'll tell a story, and you tell me if it's true or not about accounting. I've heard from my sources that if you have a client that is being audited, one of the techniques you'll use is to make yourself so unpresentable, shall we say, that the judge or who's ever doing the accounting, I don't know how this works, the auditing, will say, Lineaus, let's just forget it. Go home.
No.
Okay, what's this deal? What's the germ that story grew from?
Oh, that's just people who don't like me because I've made them miserable.
I see.
I have a gift.
Well, is there anything particular you do when you're an accountant and you got to put on?
Well, we used to be able to play games. We used to play. Part of me that is aggravating to people is that in the 70s, I was in analysis for 7 years. And so what do you do? My mother was a mean alcoholic. And so I have the problems of all children of mean alcoholics, psychological problems. And I was very fortunate to know some psychiatrists that got me into analysis. And I was in analysis for 7 years. And what you do in analysis for 7 years is you learn to listen to yourself. And as a consequence, you learn to listen to other people, what they say. And it's really a gift and a curse. But we used to, and so I talk a lot about the psychology of numbers, the psychology of the tax audit. And we used to be able to play wonderful psychological games like scheduling the appointment at 3 o'clock on Friday afternoon, and at 5 want to continue into the evening, and the auditor wanting to leave and go home and having weekend and wanting to stay. And so there is a germ. Yeah. There is a kernel of truth to that. Your medicine balls, are they art or craft? Do people buy them to display them, or do they buy them to become bulky and strong? No, they buy them to use. I do sell occasionally to art collectors. Last year I sold a bunch of balls to a sports art collector. And so I do sell the objects as art occasionally. But mostly for just to use. Along the ways of your retail stuff, you also have a lamp store that, as far as I can tell, has never been open. But it definitely exists. And what is it called? Lineaus Lamp? No, it's Marfa Lights and Lamps. Marfa Lights and Lamps. You're right. It's very Marfa to have a gallery and not open it. Yes, I'm sorry. It's the Marfa style. And I should mention, to intervene, they are art lamps. They're not. These aren't Walmart lamps. These are things that are made one time by one person. Yeah. After World War II, there was this explosion of retail in the United States, and they call it the age of retail. And I collect and sell lamps from made between 1946 and 1960 primarily, although I do have other lamps from other times. But it was a great time of individual expression in business of capitalism that is so wonderful, and regrettably we have evolved away from that system. And but it's a great time for people, creativity. There was this explosion of creativity after World War II, and that creativity is really expressed in the production of lamps.
So is it a lamp store or a lamp gallery?
It's a lamp store. I actually have sold lamps this year.
If I walked into your lamp store with $500, could I buy anything there?
No, you could buy something.
Oh.
You could buy a lamp. You could buy a nice lamp. I sold a very nice lamp for $500 a couple of weeks ago. I mean, but they're pricey.
Right.
But they're art.
They're
one of a kind, and they'll keep their value.
You mentioned that you had what you called a word press or a letterpress?
Letterpress.
And I know that you collect old Mexican broadsides.
Yes, I do.
As well. Well, let's deal with this as an art collector. What kind of art do you like? And I know that you told me once you tithe basically to the art world.
I do tithe. I spend at least 10% of my income on art every year, and have for the last 20 years. I like art, political art, and so most of my art is political, although some of it isn't. My interest in Jose Guadalupe Posada's broadsides are the wonderful leftist tradition of art in Mexico that took Mexican art in a path that American art did not want to follow. One of the interesting things about art in North America is the great artists of our time, of the 20th century, half of them went to Mexico City to be part of the art movement in Mexico City, which was all leftist. I mean, all leftist based. They produced art for the masses. They thought about art for the masses. And that's one of the big differences of Mexican art and American art, because American art is really elitist, and Mexican art is engaging. It's to be enjoyed and appreciated by the masses.
Well, since you bring it up, using the politeness which we know and love you for, what is your critique of the art that is centered around this area?
Oh, I don't think it's art. I think it's elitism. I think it's an expression of elitism, and I think you have to be told it's art. Mm-hmm. One of this in 1900, there was a division in art. Actually, before, the Impressionists were the first to start painting paintings of ordinary people, and art had a conflict, had a crisis, and was it going to be art for the masses or art for the elite? In America, the art became for the elite. And so what you see in Marfa, the art here, is elitist art. It's not art for the masses. It has a limited appreciation. One of the most interesting things that I run into is when I meet Hispanics or Mexicans from Mexico. They all say, one of the interesting things they say is that why don't these people go to Chihuahua City and go to the museum and see some Diego Rivera murals and Orozco and see some real art? Well, because that's real art.
Because you pose that as a question, I'll answer. I would think that a lot of people would say, well, they're both real art. I'm not an advocate of either one, but I would think that someone would say, the motive, you're putting the cart before the horse. When someone makes art, they're making something that is personal and meaningful to them. They're not really targeting it at their audience until maybe later in their career or towards the very end. But let me just finish, and then you can. This idea of being populist or elitist really comes more from art critics than it does from the artist himself or herself.
There's a word, eudemonism, eudemonistic, eudemonistic.
Note to self, okay.
Yeah, eudemonistic. It's production of art to make yourself happy. Mm-hmm. It's to do anything. It's a philosophy of happiness. And if you study art as a history of art in Western civilization, you'll find and you'll discover that artists always produced art for the future. It's always art about the future. Let's express to the future our love of life, and the art that we see here is not about the future seeing their love of life. It's about making themselves happy and enjoyable. Mm-hmm. And that is really dead-ended. That's a dead end. You can't go anywhere. You have to make art for the future. And this art is not about the future. It's about making the artist happy.
Did you overlap here with Donald Judd? Did you ever meet him or know him?
No, I got his dog.
Oh, go ahead. There's a story.
Well, no, when he passed away, he had 2 dogs, one of which was ultimately put down because it had some cancer, and I got Bruja, which I named Fannie Mae, big black Belgian shepherd, wonderful dog, and so I got his dog, and that's the only connection I have with him.
Well, why, Lineaus, do you have so many dogs, and why did I think you had 20 when, have you ever...
I've had 40 dogs at one time.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I'll be very honest. I need something to love, and I need to be loved, and that's why you have a lot of dogs.
How do you get them?
I get them at the pound now. I always try to pick up an abandoned dog on the road. I'm always the fool that will pick up an abandoned dog, and
well, but hold on. You're more than the fool who picks up the abandoned dog. Apparently, you're also the guy who doesn't give it back.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I'm real selfish about my dogs. Uh-huh. No, but I love my dogs, and they have great homes, and they're cared for, and they have shots, and they go to the vets and all that sort of stuff.
Who's the guy with 3 legs?
That's Anne Hutchinson.
Uh-huh.
And Anne Hutchinson, of course, is America's first feminist, and really one of the real founding thinkers of Americanism. And she's my problem, and I'm a disciple of Anne Hutchinson, and she's my problem I'm having with Christianity and my leaving of my Christian faith.
Well, that's why we're here. Let's go. What's going on?
Well, Anne Hutchinson was...
No, your Christian faith.
Oh, my Christian faith.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, one of the things that really interests me currently, because I have these periodic interests, and I have a real obsession with evolutionary psychology. And I have theories, and they're online, and we can go into those. I would love to go into those, but they take time, and you have to be willing to
That'll be part 2.
Part 2.
Mm-hmm.
But I really believe that love is the dictator of our emotions. Mm-hmm. And I really like Christianity because of its emphasis on love. What really turns me off, like turned Anne Hutchinson off, was the use of all the chauvinistic jerks in monotheism. They use the Old Testament, and I just loathe and detest the Old Testament. And I think my problem with Christianity is that the people who are up to no good always use the Old Testament to rationalize and justify their nefarious deeds, and I just have a hard time with that in Christianity. Is every time I seem to get into it and really enjoy the concept of love and Jesus' message of love, you run into this use of the Old Testament to keep people down into negative waves and that sort of stuff. Anyway.
Lineaus Lorette, making some connections here, I see, or let me put it this way, I wonder if the motivation that makes you favor populist art, that makes you a small C communist, that makes you enthusiastic about Anne Hutchinson, is what makes you favor underdogs, literally, in this case. Like, maybe the reason you're so into dogs, the stray dogs, is for the same reason that you have your political beliefs and your church beliefs.
I'm sure you're right. I know you're right. I've been in analysis. I have thought about this.
You're in analysis right now.
Yes, I'm in analysis right now.
Well, now we're going to be in analysis, because I have heard through the grapevine that you are not always thoroughly in favor of KRTS, Marfa Public Radio. And in fairness, with the politeness that we know and love you for, we'd love to hear what the problem is.
I have problems with the management of the radio station. I listen to the radio station. I have in the past from time to time contributed to the radio station. The problem I have with the radio station is its management, and I think that it needs a Hispanic voice here. This is a Hispanic area. I think our future of this country is in the Hispanic world. I could spend the 29 minutes that we have today talking about the wonderful consequences of opening the border and letting all the Mexicans and El Salvadorians and the Guatemalans and the Hondurans come up here and boom our economy. That's what will happen.
Let's refocus. So let's spend 30 seconds on. By the way, I'm in favor of the management, and they let me speak. My mom is from Mexico, so they obviously are not too upset with the Mexican-American connection. But take 30 seconds. Take 30 seconds and tell us what you would do if you would manage KRTS, because that's what we offer people.
I would, rather than having Cajun music, which they have, which I enjoy. I'm from South Louisiana. I love Cajun music, but why don't we there's this rich world of South American and Central American and Mexican music, an enormously rich world, and why aren't we mining that world for the filler that they obviously need for programming? Why are we using this time? The radio station is in a perfect place to be a bridge between the Hispanic and Anglo worlds, and I would hope that that's what it would be. And I have problems with the radio station in the sense that they continually mispronounce Spanish names. And it just drives me crazy.
Well, we don't see eye to eye on that. And I'll tell you, I've always had a problem when I turn into an NPR station. They'll be chugging along using the pronunciations of the American language, and then they'll say, but as soon as he left Texas for Nicaragua. And I wonder, why is this specifically a Spanish issue? Why do we not, on the radio pronounce Napoleon, and so forth? It seems to be a specific gripe that you have about, in this case, Mexican-American names. Is that correct?
Because I want this town to have a positive future. And the way you do that is to include the Hispanic population.
Okay.
And to work at pronouncing Hispanic names, Spanish names properly. You don't have to roll R's, but there's a real difference in Rodriguez and Rodriguez. And the Hispanic population hear that difference. And it's just a small thing, but it's an important thing to try to include the majority population of this area and try to make an effort. I was at UT in 1964, and the street that ran west of the campus was called Guadalupe. And by 68, it was Guadalupe. And no one told us to do this. We did this on our own as an awareness of the contribution that Mexicans have made to Texas, that we would make an effort to pronounce their names the way they wanted to hear them.
Point taken. Lineaus, 30 seconds left. I have heard that you sleep outside. Is that true?
I do sleep outside.
But you live in Fort Davis. You have a house.
I have a home, an ancestral home. My parents built a home in Fort Davis, and I have it.
And how do you sleep outside?
I have a big porch, and a huge porch, and so I sleep under the porch.
In 15 seconds, not a lot, but do you have something to say that we haven't covered? Someone to say hello to, a history lesson we should listen to, an artist you like?
An artist I like?
Yeah.
Oh, well, Aaron Ristow is coming to town next week, and he's going to have a show at Buck and Camps with a very famous glass artist from Lubbock, and I would hope everyone would come.
Thank you very much. That's Lineaus Lorette. This is Talk at 10. Thank you, everyone, for joining.